It is August 11th, 2025, and all eyes are on the upcoming summit in Alaska between Presidents Trump and Putin. And the US appears to be the more optimistic side here, at least for now. You've got Trump saying that, we're just going to swap some territories and be done with it. JD Vance is saying that the US is done funding this war, but is it going to be that easy? Especially as you have Zelensky saying he's not going to be recognizing any territory as part of Russia. You have the top politicians in Europe getting together, releasing a statement and insisting that Zelensky needs to be present at this summit. And then you have Russia continuing to hold to their demands. We're not really sure yet what they are going to agree to, what they are going to present, and how they are going to handle these talks. A lot to continue to keep an eye on, which is exactly what we'll be doing this week. And that's what we got into with a special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, a combat veteran, national security analyst, and host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Colonel Davis, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Hey, delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, as I know that US President Trump and Russian President Putin have agreed to an in-person meeting in Alaska coming up on Friday. But while the US seems to expect that some sort of a deal is going to be made, that we're making progress towards the end of the war in Ukraine, Russia seems a bit more hesitant that everything is going to just come together so quickly. And Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has even cautioned that any celebrations right now would be premature. So, how do you view this summit, and just how high are the stakes here?
Well, the stakes are really high for nearly everybody involved. And I'll just say Russia's hesitancy and unwillingness to be excited is certainly reasonable and appropriate. I wish the same was true on our side, but I fear it may not be. And just look, so you had President Trump enter an office saying he was going to get rid of this war in 24 hours because he knew Vladimir Putin, he knew Volodymyr Zelensky, he knew what motivated them both. This is going to be easy, he said in 2023. Didn't quite turn out that way. One day turned into 100 days, and then it turned into a couple of weeks, and then it was within days. In April, it turned into within days, and then that vanished, and then all of a sudden it was 50 days, and then it was 10 days, and then that vanished as well. And there's never been anything behind any of it. No consequence, no results. So nobody in Russia should put any kind of stock in anything that the U.S. side is saying here. And I mean, that's from the president on down. We keep saying lots of different things. And then now in this particular situation here, terrific that President Trump and Vladimir Putin are meeting. That is 100 times better than anything in the previous administration, where they wouldn't even talk to him on any official level. And so, great. So now we at least have a chance to have something happen at the leader level. But the problem for President Trump is that you have Volodymyr Zelensky directly contradicting him, saying that what you're saying you're going for, I'm not going to agree. And of course, the European Union had this joint statement by the biggest heads of Europe saying the same thing, that, well, we want nothing with Ukraine, without Ukraine, territorial integrity. We still want NATO on the table. I think Mark Rutte even said it's still on the table. Keir Starmer has said that. So you see that the West is miles apart. You have Europe and Ukraine really in one camp, and then you have President Trump way over my shoulder on the other, and then you have the Russian side over on this side. So how could anybody rationally put any hope that this is going to bring something to an end? So I think everybody should be taking the cautious approach here and very low expectations.
Yeah, even if Trump comes in and says, okay, we've got the framework for a deal, as you were pointing out, he has all of these people around him to undermine him and to say, okay, well, we're not going to implement that deal. You can agree to whatever you want. And of course, there would then be consequences coming from the US. But it's been interesting, too, to watch this from Russia's side, because up until this point, Putin has really resisted an in-person meeting. And the line of thinking seemed to be that Russia wanted to wait until there was some sort of a deal. That way, when we have the handshake and the photo op, it's kind of more towards the end of this thing than at the point we're currently at, which is, I mean, they may have some sort of an agreement, but it's not going to be something that wraps up this war and really the US proxy war against Russia with a pretty bow and then says we're done with it. And even last week, when Putin confirmed that there were plans for this meeting, he suggested the UAE as a possible meeting place. And then Trump comes out and says, okay, we're meeting in Alaska. So, what do you make of Putin's approach here? I mean, in a way, he doesn't really need a deal, but he's certainly doing a lot to make it clear that Russia is ready and willing to be engaged in these negotiations, even as it continues to pursue its goals on the battlefield.
I'll tell you, I think that I think the reason why Putin agreed to this is because he views this as a no-lose situation. He's going to win no matter how this thing comes out. President Trump, on the other hand, I think has unwittingly put himself in a no-win situation. He's going to lose almost no matter what happens here, because it's clear that President Trump just wants the war to end. Good on that. I'm for that. I'm for anything that's going to end this war, even if it's on bad terms, because a bad term ending is better than this stupid continuous war with continuous death and bloodshed on all sides of this conflict that we have right now. At least there's a chance to work on something to sustain the cessation of hostilities afterwards. But we got to get there first. For Putin's side, first of all, I think that he realizes that if he comes to this meeting and says to the world, listen, I'm doing everything in my power from a position of clear military superiority, economic superiority, diplomatic superiority. Everything is in our favor. We don't have to talk, as you mentioned a second ago. We can just keep fighting, but we are. And I'm now going to meet face to face with the leader of the Western side. And I'm willing to say, hey, there's some things that we're willing to give you, but there's some big things we're not willing to. This is what I suspect. Now, the Russian side is, as they always do, is very close to the vest of what they're going to talk about. But there's been some rumors that the Russian side may actually hand over or not take part of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. I personally think that that's a rumor that's not substantiated. That's wishful thinking. I can't imagine that Russia, after having put those countries or those regions into the Russian constitution, is now going to suddenly say, okay, never mind. Y'all just go over there and good luck to you. I think that he's going to probably tell Trump behind closed doors, everything I said in June 2024, the year ago this past June, is still the case today. And that means demilitarization, denazification, definitely no NATO, and the withdrawal to the administrative borders of all four of the provinces. That is our minimum line. I won't accept anything less than that. And if we don't get it, then we'll keep fighting. But we're willing to withdraw from Sumy. We'll withdraw from Kharkiv, maybe Dnipropetrovsk, etc. A few things he can give in on, but I don't think those other ones at home, I don't think Putin can give in on. So if he does come in and say that, then the ball is in Trump's court. Either you accept my terms, or now I keep fighting anyway. And that's what Russia's been saying all year. But now then they have more political cover where it matters the most for Russia, and that is in the global south and in Asia, because they are not looking at this through a Western lens. And to them, that would show, boy, he really did try to meet Putin. So I can understand now why he's going to keep going on, because the Western side is going to continue the war if he doesn't agree to their terms from a position of weakness, which the Western side has. So I don't understand why they would do that. On the other hand, Trump, if let's just say that he gets Putin to agree to that, and that Trump does, and said, all right, you give us back Sumy and Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk, and promise that the war is going to come to an end, or whatever else he would say. Now Trump goes back and he can't sell that to Europe or Ukraine. So then Trump comes off looking weak, like he can't even control our own side. If Trump goes in and doesn't agree to those terms that Putin says, then it looks like we're malcontents and he can't move Putin, because Trump, I believe, thinks that he tells everybody, and I think himself, that he has solved 6 wars already in this administration, and he thinks this is going to be the 7th. He's going to get that Nobel Peace Prize. I think he's already looked and put a place on the wall where he's going to put his plaque. I think he's moving down that path here. But now then, there is no chance that Putin's going to agree to something that the West wants. And if Trump is seen either as not getting Russia or not getting the West to adhere to his desires, he comes off looking bad and weak. And then what would he do if that happens on the Russian side, didn't agree to it? Is he going to keep sanctions going? Is he going to put more sanctions on? That's obviously not going to work, and that's probably why he hadn't done it so far. Is he going to start putting more weapons on the Ukraine side because he's angry at Putin for not doing what he wanted? Well, that's not going to make any difference because we don't have it. We don't have enough to give. So Trump is coming in with a few like fours and threes and twos in his hand, and Putin's got all the face cards. And so I think Trump has set himself up for a real problem here. I don't see how he wins.
Yeah, that's a really great point to keep in mind because as you were laying it out there, I was thinking, if the US just continues on in the same way, exactly as you were noting, they keep sending more weapons that they have, or at least the ones that they have to give, they keep adding more sanctions. Eventually, there's going to come a point where Kiev's government and military fall apart because they don't have the manpower, they don't have the weapons. Not that that's going to happen overnight, but eventually, right? And on the other hand, if Trump agrees to kind of what Putin is demanding here, which one of those major demands that Russia has brought up over and over again is the importance of Ukraine being a neutral state, right? No NATO membership, yes, but also no NATO propping up Kiev and rearming their military for the next confrontation with Russia. They don't want a Minsk III style agreement. When it comes to Trump's understanding of all of this, do you think he realizes how bad the situation is for Ukraine and therefore for all of NATO if they keep at this and if they, well, even then, if they don't keep at this, right? It's a bad situation all around.
I think he's aware of the human cost on the Ukraine side. He does. And I've talked to people who've been behind the scenes, and they say he's genuinely motivated by the human cost era. I wish he was motivated by the human cost in the Middle East and Palestine, but that's a separate issue. We'll talk about that another day. But he does seem to really be motivated by the loss on the Ukraine side. But I don't think at all that he himself is understanding the dynamics of this and how he's otherwise. Why would he put himself in this position where he almost can't win now, unless that he sit behind closed doors? He has some assurances from Europe and or Ukraine or just Europe that, hey, listen, I'm going to agree to something like this, and you better get used to it because I'm withdrawing all my support if I don't get this. And you want to go on this by yourself, go ahead, but I'll give you political cover if you want to go with me. Now, if that's the case, that's the one sliver where Trump could come out ahead and this war could come to an end, because then Ukraine would have no choice but to submit, whether they wanted to or not. But I just can't imagine any scenario where Russia, after fighting 3.5 years and in all the superior positions that they're in, to concede anything that's going to allow the Ukraine military and government to continue in its existent state and have any kind of military connection with the outside. That would almost be foolish to do in human terms, in military terms. But you also have to understand, in light of this, in fact, in the days now leading up to this meeting, Russia has been really pushing hard on the battlefront. And over just the last 12 hours, there was a major push 10 kilometers in a single day north of Pokrovsk. And it remains to be seen what the Russians are going to do with this. Why did they have this sudden break in here? I know it's got folks I've talked to and seen on both the Ukraine side and even on surprise on the Russian side that there was a big breakthrough, much bigger than a normal day. And there's also reports that Russia has been moving a lot of forces in the Zaporizhia area behind the scenes, like they're getting ready for a harder push there. They are pushing hard on the battlefront. And if anybody thinks that Ukraine can just keep rolling into 2026 and just keep the war going, listen, I'm not sure that they can last through the end of this year as a coherent military force if something isn't done to end the war here in Alaska. The stakes couldn't be bigger.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think that's kind of been Russia's goal, right? They're fighting a war of attrition. They're not just fighting to take territory, they are fighting to wear down Kiev's military to the point where it falls apart. And yet you have Zelensky over here, and he still doesn't seem to get it. And I always kind of wonder, when he talks and he's spouting off on social media and saying, oh, we would never stop fighting for this territory, right? We're never going to stop fighting for Crimea, even though it's been reincorporated into Russia since 2014. That's still on his list. I always wonder, okay, does he have the backing of the West, or does he feel like he does? Or is he really spouting off thinking that he can't be easily replaced and that he's not the Western puppet that he truly is? How do you see Kiev's position in this right now? Obviously, Zelensky has not been invited to this summit. So Russia's kind of making it clear, as they have previously, noting that they don't see him as a legitimate leader. He's overstayed his term. They're questioning who's going to sign the deal when there eventually is a deal. And now you have the US coming in. I know there's some reports about the White House possibly sneaking Zelensky into this summit and making sure that he's there. Obviously, they know that that would be a non starter for Russia. So, how do you view the position that Kiev's in? Do they have any, well, really any autonomy here, any ability to do anything that does not have the West signing off on it at every step, even if Kiev is here falling apart?
My honest opinion, this is not a pejorative. This is just an honest assessment. I think that Zelensky has become delusional. And we've seen it happen in history before where so much pressure gets put on a leader for so long is that he finally loses the ability to rationally look at a situation. And what he's saying coming out of his mouth, in his heart, he may believe, but his brain is no longer able to process information like maybe it was at another time. And so when he keeps saying this stuff like he did yesterday, that we are not going to give up any territory, completely contradicts what President Trump has to say and about swapping territory or anything else. And he's still talking about, no, we have a complete territorial integrity. Only Russia is at fault for this war, and only they're going to end it on my terms. I mean, that's irrational. No matter whether he's a puppet or not, that's irrational for those words to come out of your leader's mouth, because it simply can't be manifest. You don't have any capacity whatsoever to compel the stronger side to your women. He's talking as though it's like two equal or nearly equal sides, and this is, we're going to be tough, and it's more like this. It's way off the charts and down here. Unfortunately, that's echoed by the European Union. They're saying the same things. Territorial integrity, NATO still on the table. The very reason for Russia going into this war at all, there's a number of them, but that was one of the key ones, which they have repeated ad nauseum all 3.5 years since the war started. And now here we keep saying it. I mean, I think on American television yesterday, you had Mark Rutte repeating that. And it just belies any kind of rationale. If Zelensky is delusional, it's hard to say that the European side is delusional, and more likely that they're just callous, and they know, they're aware of what's going on. They're aware of what this means, and they're okay with continuing on to keep Ukraine in the fight, because they may calculate, well, that'll continue to harm Russia. And they are morally okay with doing that on the backs and the bones and the blood of the Ukrainian people and the destruction of their country. They're willing to sacrifice everything, knowing where this is going to end, because anyone who can do simple math can see that Ukraine cannot defeat Russia, especially now. If it was less clear in the early part of the war, to me, it was just clear from the beginning. There's no way you could ever think that Russia was going to lose this. But now then, no one can say anything different. Rationally, there is no chance. So if you're now supporting maximalist objectives from the weaker side that no logic can say would be happening, then that, to me, has to mean that you're okay and cognizant of what this is going to mean to the Ukraine people, and that you'll use them up like a wash rag until there's literally nothing left, and then you'll just clap your hands and move on and say, well, darn it, we have it. And then they'll probably say, and now we'll keep spending a lot of money, because now then that darn Russian bear is going to come west, and they're going to roll into the rest of Europe, etc. So now then they'll just do that, and they'll use the wreckage of Ukraine as justification. See what they did to them? Now we have to build up even bigger. So I think that's probably the play of Europe. I think it's reprehensible. And plus, I just don't think it's going to work, because they're going to end up cratering their own economies by even trying to go down that path, whereas Russia has clearly retooled its economy and reoriented its economy to where they can sustain themselves in the global south and Asia and elsewhere in the world, not the least of which is India itself. And we're on, sinking sand. And instead of recognizing we're on sinking sand and saying, all right, let's take this brilliant opportunity that Trump has, we can condemn him, whatever, but let's take advantage of it, get this war over with, and stop the bleeding for us, even if you don't care about Ukraine. But it doesn't look to me like they care about their own people or Ukraine. So that's really disturbing to me as an American.
Yeah, that's really the alarming part of all of this is you're watching Europe and you're going, okay, all of these politicians are willing to sell their souls, sell out the countries that they represent to what? Try to weaken Russia at some point eventually, right? Because that's exactly as you were noting there. That's the promise, is that eventually Russia is going to be hurt, and then eventually Russia is going to try to come attack all the rest of Europe. So they would love it if Russia really stormed through the rest of Ukraine, because then they would feel like they had some sort of a legitimate threat. When it comes to the way that the US is handling kind of its overall foreign policy right now. I know that Trump came in with his promise. He's always promising to end the endless wars. This time around, it was no new wars. And yet now he's on the US foreign policy train. He's already attacked Iran. That is still a war that, while there is a ceasefire right now, I'm not trusting that it's fully over
Yeah,
yet.
see, I don't even call it a ceasefire. We just stopped shooting for now, but nothing has been solved.
Yeah, that's the weird part about it, isn't it? There never was any kind of actual deal or agreement. It was just we stopped attacking them, and then Iran said that they were done with their retaliation. I mean, when you're looking at the Middle East, and now we have Netanyahu announcing that Israel is going to occupy Gaza City, so clearly there's going to be more death and destruction there. But Trump is almost trying to act like this is kind of a hands off. This is Israel controlling everything. We can't do anything about it. We just have to keep sending them money and weapons and more support. How do you view the situation when it comes to the Middle East and the way that the US is handling it?
Well, I mean, let's just look at the foreign policy writ large, because Trump entered into office saying he was going to end the Russia-Ukraine war. He wanted to end the Israel-Hamas war. He wanted to not start any other wars. He wanted to bring peace everywhere. And of course, now then all of a sudden we're talking about, well, except that we might go and take Greenland. We might go and get the Suez Canal back. Not the Suez Canal.
The Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal, sorry, yeah. I want to get that back, and maybe we'll make Canada 51st state. Maybe we'll do it peacefully, maybe we won't. Now then, we're going to start going after cartels. We may attack into Mexico. We did attack into Iran, as you pointed out. We still have troops in Iraq. We still have troops in Syria. We still have troops in various parts of Africa, and we're still supporting the Ukraine war against Russia, and we haven't pulled out of that yet. So while Trump wants to call himself a Nobel Peace Prize winner for allegedly ending wars that that other countries are involved in, and I'm still a little puzzled why Armenia and Azerbaijan both want to give him credit for ending that war. We'll see if it's actually over. I have some grave doubts about that. But of the wars that he has control over and the military thing there, it's like this is expanded from even recent past. So it's a puzzler to me why he wants to keep saying. I mean, he's like trying to say I'm two separate things simultaneously, one for peace, one for war, and of the things he has control over, there's no peace going in. So I don't understand. And we'll look at it, that one specific one in the Middle East there, by claiming I don't have any control over this. Well, of course, you have every control over this. Netanyahu can't do anything in there without the uninterrupted supply of ammunition and weapons and intelligence by the United States. So if he wanted that to come to an end, just like Biden could have before and chose not to, we're supporting it. So we are culpable for everything that happens in there, because without us, it doesn't. And, I mean, he can say, well, that's up to Netanyahu. He can do whatever he wants. He's a sovereign leader. Well, that's true as far as it goes, but it's not true as far as you're enabling him to do these reprehensible and immoral things. So all this is mixed into one guy. So it's a weird time in America right now, and I'm troubled just even domestically if we want to even go down that path one of these days.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you. And it's always so interesting, too, because we're only just over 6 months into Trump's second term in office. And I'm
Right.
looking at him going, we still have
Right.
3.5 years of this. And then who even knows what comes after it? And I know that for a lot of Americans watching, those who are worried about the situation domestically, also those who are worried about US foreign policy and kind of looking around, you kind of puts you in this place where you go, okay, so was there a point in voting for Trump, or were we just going to be on this path either way, whether it was Kamala Harris or some third party candidate or whoever, got into that seat? Before we go, when it comes to kind of what you're keeping an eye on moving forward, when it comes to US foreign policy, what are you looking at and what are kind of your biggest concerns here?
Well, my biggest concerns too are, not surprisingly, what happens with Gaza and the West Bank, for that matter, and what's going to happen after this meeting in Alaska. Because the one is, I mean, we're on the threshold of potentially seeing large scale deaths from malnutrition. Because so far there have been some. I think it's been in the scores, and a lot of people are emaciated. And there's some food coming in, but it seems to be calculated to just prevent large scale deaths. But you never know when that moment is going to be clicked over. From what I understand from talking to some experts, that prolonged malnutrition could lead to a large die-off at some point, which if it starts, it may not be able to be stopped even if all the gates came open. We saw what happened with apartheid South Africa, and there was a movement that started, and then a global movement that started, and then that ended up turning it over and changing everything. And then people who had supported them without question after a while turned against them. And we could certainly see that dynamic here. And is the United States going to be a part of fixing that situation, or are we just going to be a bystander to watch as it happens, and then we come off looking even worse? Well, maybe not even worse, but as bad as Israel, and sacrificing our ability to influence global events. Who's going to listen to us afterwards? Who's going to listen to America make a moral case for anything? Because the rest of the world sees that our hands are soaked in blood, all over the place. And whether it was Biden or Trump, I mean, so far the policies are hardly different at all in either one of these conflicts. Now, J.D. Vance did say yesterday, we're done funding the Ukraine war. So that was a pretty big statement. We'll see what that translates into on Friday, because that may be a harbinger of things to come. But unfortunately, no one knows. As I said at the outset of this, this whole thing about Trump with 24 hours, 100 days, 2 weeks, a few days, 50 days, 10 days, and then nothing ever happens. Who can trust anything that comes out of our mouth anymore? No one knows, whether friend or foe, what we're about, what we're going to do. So that means people have to take their guesses off just what's in their narrow self-interest, and that includes the European Union, because it's not inconceivable that they could detach, from us too, or at least move further away just because they can't trust us. And then there's the whole BRICS issue economically, which could have significant long-term and medium-term effects on our economic prosperity prospects. Because if more of the world says, you guys are just unstable, I'm going to connect myself with something that at least appears to be willing to have a win-win thing, and they don't demand us do whatever they want them to do. And I don't want to be at risk of sanctions. So all of these things are moving in the wrong direction for us. And as you say, we're 3 months in, or 6 months in to a 4-year term. So there's not a lot of hope on the horizon, unless Trump suddenly, is slapped with some reality that he can't get out and can't talk his way out of, and his supporters start turning on him. That's the one thing that could get him to change his policies back to why many of them elected him in the first place. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we need 2013, 2014 Trump to come meet the 2025 version and remind him of some of what he was saying on the campaign trail and even before that. I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, a combat veteran, national security analyst, and host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Certainly my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.